The rain over Yemen wasn't just falling, it was trying to wash away what was about to happen. Operation Nightfall, February 2020, a night that would ruin lives and bury truths for 6 years. The tech school sat quiet in the valley outside Al Hudaydah, white stone walls glowing pale under a crescent moon. Inside, 32 girls slept in narrow beds, dreaming of equations and algorithms, of universities in London and Boston, of futures that would never come. SEAL Team Echo moved through the darkness like ghosts. 8 operators, their boots silent on ancient stone, their weapons black and efficient. They had done this 100 times before. Infiltrate, eliminate, exfiltrate, clean slate. But this time was different. Captain Wade Keller led the stack, his night vision turning the world into shades of radioactive green. At 41, he was the oldest man on the team, and he wore that weight like armor. 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, a chest full of medals that meant he had survived when others hadn't. He believed in the mission. He believed in following orders. He believed that hard men making hard decisions kept America safe. Behind him moved Garrett Kincaid, 26 years old, the team medic and designated spotter. Tall and lean with a farm boy's build and a sniper's patience, Garrett had grown up in Idaho, learning to shoot elk at 1,000 yards before he could legally drink. He had joined the Navy to see the world. Instead, he had seen men die in a dozen different countries whose names he couldn't pronounce correctly. Third in the stack was Lieutenant Matthias Brennan. At 46, he was the team's sniper and executive officer, a quiet professional who had spent more years in combat than out of it. 2 ex-wives, no kids, nothing waiting for him stateside except an empty apartment in Virginia Beach. The teams were his family. The mission was his religion. They breached the compound wall at 0200 hours. No resistance, no guards, just sleeping children and 2 teachers who never heard the door open. Keller's voice came through the radio, cold and mechanical. Target is in room 3B, 2nd floor, east wing. Rules of engagement are weapons free, no witnesses. I say again, no witnesses. Garrett felt his stomach turn over. No witnesses. In a school full of little girls. They climbed the stairs, their suppressed rifles leading the way. The hallway smelled like chalk and lavender soap. Drawings covered the walls, crayon pictures of flowers and families in smiling suns. Garrett saw one that showed a little girl holding hands with what looked like her mother, both of them grinning under a bright blue sky. Room 3B. Keller stacked the team outside the door. Through the thin wood, they could hear soft breathing. One person, asleep. The target was Sienna Marlowe, 12 years old, an American exchange student whose parents worked for the State Department in Sana'a, a mathematical prodigy who had, at age 11, developed an encryption algorithm that the NSA couldn't crack. Not in weeks, not in months, maybe not ever. The file said she had shared her work with a professor in Cairo. The file said that professor had ties to Iranian intelligence. The file said the encryption could cripple American signals intelligence for a generation. The file said she had to be eliminated. Keller put his hand on the doorknob. Brennan, Kincaid, you're on target. I want confirmation. Double tap to the head. Clean work. Garrett's heart hammered against his ribs. Through his night vision, he could see Brennan's jaw muscles working, grinding. The older man's finger rested alongside his rifle's trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. Sir, Garrett whispered into his radio, request confirmation. Target is a minor, American citizen. Confirmed, Keller said. His voice had no emotion in it whatsoever. Execute. The door opened. The room was small and neat. A narrow bed, a desk covered in notebooks filled with equations that looked like poetry written in numbers. A laptop closed. And in the bed, a small figure curled under a thin blanket, dark hair spread across a pillow. Sienna Marlowe, 12 years old, dreaming. Brennan moved to the bedside, his rifle rising. Through the scope, he could see her face. Peaceful, innocent, a child. He lowered his weapon. "I can't do this," Brennan said quietly. Keller's voice came back sharp and hard. "That's an order, Lieutenant." Garrett stepped between Brennan and the door. His own weapon was lowered, pointing at the floor. "Sir, I second Lieutenant Brennan. This is a child, an American. This isn't a military target. This is murder." For a moment, the only sound was the girl's soft breathing and the distant call of a muezzin from a mosque in the valley below, singing the pre-dawn prayer. Then Keller moved. He entered the room fast, his sidearm already drawn. "You're both relieved. I'll handle this myself." Garrett didn't think. He stepped in front of Sienna's bed, his body between Keller and the sleeping girl. "No, sir." Keller's pistol came up, pointing at Garrett's chest. "Move, Kincaid." "No, sir." They stood like that for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. The captain and the medic, the order and the refusal, the line that couldn't be uncrossed. Keller fired. The suppressed pistol made a sound like a book slamming shut. The 9mm round hit Garrett square in the chest, right over his heart. The plate carrier absorbed most of the impact, but the kinetic energy was still enough to knock him backward into the desk. Notebooks scattered. The laptop fell. Sienna woke up screaming. Brennan moved on instinct, the muscle memory of 20 years of combat overriding everything else. He threw a flashbang through the open doorway into the hallway where the rest of the team was stacking. The grenade detonated with a sound like God's own thunderclap, and the world turned white and loud. In the chaos, Brennan grabbed Garrett by his vest harness and hauled him to his feet. Garrett was gasping, the wind knocked out of him, but he was alive. The older man shoved Sienna toward them both. "Run!" They ran. Out the window onto a narrow balcony, down a trellis that bent and cracked under their weight, into the alley behind the school, where the ancient stones still held the day's heat. Behind them, Keller's voice was screaming through the radio. "Stop them! They're compromised! Execute protocol." Protocol meant burn it all. Burn the evidence. Burn the witnesses. Burn the truth. Garrett could hear his teammates behind them, boots pounding, confused voices shouting. They had been brothers an hour ago. Now they were hunting him. The 3 of them, the medic and the sniper, and the 12-year-old girl, ran through the narrow streets of Al-Hudaydah. Brennan led the way, his rifle up, clearing corners. Garrett pulled Sienna along, his hand wrapped around her thin wrist. She was crying, gasping, not understanding. They reached the extraction point, a dried riverbed half a mile from the school. The exfil helicopter was supposed to be waiting. Instead, they found nothing but dust and stones and the distant sound of rotors fading into the night. The bird had left without them. "They abandoned us," Garrett said, his voice hollow. "Worse," Brennan replied, scanning the ridgeline with his scope. "They're coming to finish this." Gunfire erupted from the ridge above them, muzzle flashes like angry stars. Rounds snapped through the air, cracking past their heads, sparking off rocks. Brennan returned fire, controlled pairs, aiming at the flashes. He hit something because one of the lights went out with a scream that carried across the valley. "Go!" he shouted at Garrett. "Get the girl out!" Garrett didn't want to leave him. Brothers didn't leave brothers. But Brennan was right. Sienna was the mission now. The only mission that mattered. He pulled her into a ravine, a crack in the earth just wide enough for them to squeeze through. Behind them, the firefight continued, the sound of rifles overlapping, magazines being changed, men shouting tactical commands. Then silence. Garrett and Sienna kept moving, crawling through the ravine as it got narrower and darker. His chest felt like someone had hit it with a sledgehammer. Every breath hurt, but he kept moving because that's what you did. You completed the mission. You survived. They crawled for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes. Finally, the ravine opened up into a small canyon. In the distance, Garrett could see the lights of a village, fishing boats bobbing in the Red Sea. He looked back. No sign of Brennan, no sound of pursuit. "Is he dead?" Sienna asked in a small voice. It was the first thing she had said since waking up. I don't know, Garrett said honestly. Are we going to die? Garrett looked at her, 12 years old, wearing pajamas with cartoon cats on them, her whole life ahead of her if he could keep her alive. No, he said, we're not going to die, I promise. Behind them, back at the school, the explosions started. 3 of them spaced 5 seconds apart, demolition charges turning the building into rubble and fire. Keller was burning the evidence, burning the witnesses. The official story would say that Al-Qaeda terrorists had bombed a school. 31 dead, mostly children. A tragedy, a war crime, just not an American one. And somewhere in that fire, somewhere in that rubble, Garrett Kincaid and Sienna Marlowe and Matthias Brennan were supposed to be buried. But they weren't. They walked through the night toward the fishing village, and Garrett made a promise to himself. He would keep Sienna alive. He would find out who had given the order, and someday, somehow, he would make them pay. Behind them, Yemen burned. Seattle, Washington, January 2026. The rain was falling again, but this time it was cold and gray, the kind of rain that made you remember every mistake you'd ever made. St. Vincent Medical Center stood like a fortress of glass and steel in the heart of the city, its emergency room entrance glowing with harsh fluorescent light that turned the rain silver. Inside, the ER was a controlled chaos of voices and machines and the peculiar antiseptic smell that meant someone was trying to prevent death. Delaney Kincaid stood at the triage station, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her scrubs patterned with tiny cartoon stethoscopes that were supposed to make patients feel better. They never did. At 28, she had the kind of face that photographed young, but in person looked older, tired, like she had seen things that aged you from the inside. She had. Dell had spent 4 years as an Army combat medic, 3 tours, Iraq twice, Afghanistan once. She had held pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding, had called for medevacs that arrived too late, had zipped body bags on boys who looked like they should still be in high school. When her brother Garrett died in what the Navy called a training accident, she had quit the Army and come home to Seattle, became a nurse, tried to save lives in a place where the enemy wasn't bullets, but disease and bad luck and time running out. The radio on the desk crackled. St. Vincent, this is Medic 7. We're inbound with a hot one. Male, approximate age 50 to 55, 3 gunshot wounds to the abdomen, found roadside on I-5 southbound near the Boeing plant. Patient is combative, not oriented. We had to restrain. ETA 2 minutes. Dell reached for the radio. Her voice came out calm, professional, the voice she used when everything was going to hell. Copy, Medic 7. Trauma 4 is ready. What's the story? Unknown, St. Vincent. No ID, no wallet, no phone. Looks like he was in a fight, maybe a shooting. There's enough scar tissue on this guy to map out every war of the last 30 years. And he keeps yelling things, military stuff, call signs or something. Dell felt something cold touch the base of her spine. Copy, we'll be ready. She hung up the radio and looked across the ER at Dr. Julian Pierce. He was 33, brilliant, and thought he was more brilliant than he actually was. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins residency, the kind of doctor who could diagnose rare diseases but couldn't talk to patients like they were human beings. Trauma 4, Julian, GSW times 3, unstable, combative. I'm going to need you not to be an ass for the next hour. Pierce looked up from his tablet. When am I ever difficult? Do you want the list alphabetically or chronologically? The ER doors hissed open, and the paramedics came through fast, their gurney wheels squealing on the polished floor. On the gurney was a man who looked like he had been carved out of old leather and bad decisions. Dell saw him and felt the world tilt. The man was in his early 50s, graying hair cut military short, face weathered by sun and wind and violence. 3 entry wounds in his abdomen leaked dark blood through the field dressings. But that wasn't what made Dell's breath catch. It was the tattoo on his left inner forearm. A skeleton key crossed with a lightning bolt. She knew that symbol. She had seen it exactly once before, in a photograph her brother had sent her 7 years ago from a place he wasn't allowed to name. Garrett had drawn it on the back of a letter, along with a note. Our unit insignia. The key opens doors. The lightning strikes fast. We're ghosts, DB, the kind that don't leave footprints. The man was thrashing against the restraints, his eyes wide and wild, pupils blown. He wasn't seeing the ER. He was seeing something else, somewhere else. Contact right, he screamed. Need suppressing fire. Where's my extract? Where's the goddamn helicopter? The paramedics were trying to hold him down. One of them, a guy named Miller, who Dell had worked with for years, looked terrified. He's been like this the whole ride. Broke 1 restraint already. We had to sedate him, but he burned through 5 milligrams of Versed like it was water. Pierce stepped forward with his stethoscope. Sir, you're in a hospital. You need to calm down. The man's hands shot out and grabbed Pierce's wrist with a grip that turned the doctor's face white. Get your hands off me. Perimeter's breached. I need exfil now. Dell moved, not toward the patient, but toward the supply cabinet. She grabbed a leather restraint, the heavy-duty kind they use for prisoners, and moved to the head of the gurney. Miller, step back. Julian, you too. Dell, he needs someone who speaks his language. Back up. She positioned herself where the man could see her without turning his head. His eyes were blue, she noticed. Bright blue and absolutely terrified. Hey, she said quietly, not her nurse voice. The voice she had used in Kandahar when she was patching up Marines who were screaming for their mothers. You're stateside. You're in Seattle. You're safe. The man's eyes found hers. For a moment, just a moment, she saw recognition there. Not of her specifically, but of the tone, the calmness, the competence. Seattle's compromised, he gasped. They're everywhere. In the wire. I need to. Look at the floor, Dell said, her voice firm. Look down. What do you see? He looked. White vinyl tile, scuffed from thousands of footsteps, stained with years of spilled coffee and worse things. White tile, Dell continued. Not sand, not dirt. Look at the lights above you. He looked up. Fluorescent panels, harsh and bright and humming with electricity. Not the sun, not stars. You're inside. You're in a hospital, in America. You came home. His breathing was starting to slow, just a fraction. The terror in his eyes was shifting, clarity bleeding through the hallucination like ink through water. Dell took a chance. She looked at the tattoo on his arm again, at the skeleton key and lightning bolt. She remembered her brother's letter, the last one she had received before he died. Before the Navy said he died in a training accident off the coast of Yemen, 3 weeks after that letter, 3 weeks after he'd written about a man with a call sign that meant death in the shadows. The letter had mentioned a name. Nomad, Dell said quietly. The man on the gurney froze. His entire body went rigid. He stared at her with an intensity that made her feel like he was looking straight through her skin into her bones. Who told you that name? His voice was different now, clearer, present. Dell leaned closer. Behind her, she could hear Pierce protesting, Miller warning her to be careful. She ignored them all. I'm going to say something, she whispered, and if I'm right, you need to trust me. Can you do that? The man, Nomad, gave the smallest nod. Dell took a breath. She said the words her brother had taught her when she was 10 years old, playing in the treehouse their grandfather had built in the woods behind the Idaho ranch. Their secret code, the password that meant safety, that meant family, that meant someone you could trust even when the world was burning down. Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot, 7, Niner. The man's eyes went wide. All the fight drained out of him like someone had opened a valve. His muscles went slack. The shears he had grabbed from the table clattered to the floor. Sierra 1, he whispered, his voice breaking. Verify signal. Dell felt tears prick her eyes. Sierra 1, that was her brother's call sign. And if this man knew it, if he recognized the code, then he had known Garrett, had served with him, had maybe been there when he died. Or maybe Garrett wasn't dead at all. This is Sierra 2, Dell said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. I verify. Echo. Victor. Tango. The man reached up with a shaking hand and gripped her forearm. His grip was weak, fading. Sierra 2, he breathed. Garrett's little sister. He showed me your picture. Said you could shoot a quarter at 500 yards. 600, Dell corrected automatically. On a good day. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed against the gurney, unconscious. The machine started screaming. His blood pressure was crashing, heart rate spiking. Pierce shoved forward, all business now. He's coding. Get him to surgery. Move! The next 4 hours were a blur of scalpels and sutures and blood. Dell assisted even though she wasn't supposed to, scrubbing in and handing instruments to the surgical team. 3 bullets removed, all 9mm rounds, the kind cops used, or tactical contractors, or anyone who wanted to kill efficiently. 1 had perforated his bowel, another had nicked his liver, the third had lodged against his spine without severing it. He should have died. The fact that he hadn't was either luck or sheer stubbornness. They moved him to the ICU afterward, intubated and sedated and handcuffed to the bed rails with heavy steel cuffs that looked like they belonged in a prison. 2 military police officers took up position outside his room, both of them hard-eyed men who looked like they had been carved from the same stone as the patient. Dell sat in the break room at 4 in the morning, her hands shaking around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Her scrubs were stained with his blood. She hadn't changed yet, couldn't bring herself to move. Detective Sarah Thorne found her there. The cop was 45, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of detective who had seen every lie the city could tell and still showed up for work every day. You want to tell me what the hell happened in Trauma 4? Thorne asked, pulling up a chair. I de-escalated a combative patient, Dell said. That's what nurses do. You shouted a call sign in a series of numbers that sounded like military code. Then you tackled a man who had already put 1 orderly in the hospital with a broken wrist. And 20 minutes after we got him to surgery, the Navy showed up. Dell looked up. The Navy? Men in suits who didn't smile, claimed they were from Naval Criminal Investigative Service, but their IDs looked wrong, too new. They tried to take custody of your patient right then, middle of surgery. The chief surgeon told them to pound sand, said moving him would kill him. Thorne leaned forward. Then they did something interesting. They wiped the security footage, all of it, every camera from the ambulance bay to the ICU. Cloud backups, local servers, everything. Gone. Dell's hands tightened on her coffee cup. They can do that? They shouldn't be able to, but they did, which means your mystery patient is someone very important or very dangerous, or both. Thorne's eyes narrowed. One of the MPs let something slip while they were setting up outside his room. They're not here to protect him, Dell. They're here to guard him. He's not a hero they're shielding. He's something they want contained. What are they saying he did? Went rogue, killed his own unit. That's the story. They're waiting for him to wake up so they can interrogate him. And once they have what they want, he's going to disappear into some black site where even his lawyer won't find him. Dell stood up, the chair scraping back. I need to see him. Dell, I need to see him, Sarah. Thorne studied her for a long moment. What's going on? How do you know this guy? I don't, Dell said. It was the truth. But I think he knew my brother, the one who died 6 years ago. The training accident. Yeah, the accident. Dell's voice was flat, dead. She had never believed it was an accident. Training accidents didn't come with closed caskets and redacted files and officers who couldn't look her in the eye at the funeral. Thorne sighed. I can't help you if you do something stupid. I know, but I also can't stop you. You're off shift in an hour. What you do after that is your business. Dell managed a small smile. Thanks, Sarah. She went home to her apartment, a studio in Capitol Hill that smelled like the curry place downstairs. She showered, washing the blood out from under her fingernails, watching the water turn pink in the drain. Then she sat on her bed and opened her phone. She had an app that looked like a game, but was actually an encrypted storage system. Inside it were scans of every letter her brother had ever sent her. She scrolled to the last one, dated 3 weeks before the Yemen mission, 3 weeks before the Navy told her he was dead. Hey, DB, it began, using the nickname he had given her when they were kids. Things are getting weird out here. Can't say where, you know the drill. But I wanted you to know, if anything happens to me, if the story doesn't make sense, you should look for someone. Call sign Nomad. Real name is Matthias Brennan. Best shot I've ever seen. Better than Grandpa Reese even, and that's saying something. If I go dark, find Nomad. He knows where the bodies are buried. Literally. Remember the treehouse code. Remember what Grandpa taught us. And remember, I love you, little sister. You're tougher than you think. Dell read it 3 times. Then she looked up Matthias Brennan on a search engine, knowing she wouldn't find anything. The kind of men who had call signs and skeleton key tattoos didn't leave digital footprints. She found nothing. No Facebook, no LinkedIn, no obituary, nothing. The man didn't exist in the civilian world, but he existed in that hospital room, handcuffed to a bed, surrounded by men who wanted to make him disappear. Dell made a decision. She grabbed her go bag from the closet, the one she kept packed from her days as a combat medic. Sutures, antibiotics, field dressings, local anesthetic. She added a burner phone, $300 in cash, and her grandfather's old Colt 1911 pistol, the one he had carried in the Gulf War. Then she went back to the hospital. It was 6 in the morning when she returned. Shift change, the busiest time, when everyone was distracted. She badged through security, moving like she belonged there because she did. She took the stairs to the ICU, avoiding the elevators where cameras could track her. The 2 MPs were still outside Nomad's room. They looked tired, end of a long shift. Dell straightened her scrubs, put on her best professional face, and walked right up to them. I need to check his vitals and adjust his antibiotic drip, she said confidently. He was spiking a fever an hour ago. The taller MP frowned. The doctor does that. The doctor is currently in the ER dealing with a 4-car pileup on the highway. And if this man seizes because his temp hits 105 and no one noticed, I will personally make sure everyone knows you blocked medical care. Your names will be in the report. The MPs looked at each other. Dell could see them calculating. A dead prisoner was paperwork. A live one was job security. Make it quick, the tall one said. Door stays open. Dell walked into the room. It was dim, lit only by the green glow of the cardiac monitor. Nomad lay there, intubated and still, his chest rising and falling with the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. He looked smaller now, older. Without the adrenaline and fear, he was just a man who had been hurt badly and might not survive. Dell moved to the bedside. She checked the monitor. Heart rate steady at 80, blood pressure low but acceptable. She reached for his hand, the one that wasn't cuffed to the bed rail. His fingers twitched. She looked at his face. His eyes were open just barely, looking at her, aware. Dell leaned down, her lips close to his ear. Don't move, she whispered. Don't make a sound. Can you hear me? The smallest nod. His eyes were clearer now, focused. I'm Garrett's sister, Delaney. If you know anything about what happened to him, I need you to tell me. But first, we need to get you out of here. These men, they're not going to let you talk. They're going to disappear you. Nomad's hand moved weakly, pointing. Dell followed his gaze to the IV pole beside the bed. The bag hanging there was labeled Standard Saline with Antibiotics. but Nomad was staring at it with absolute terror in his eyes. Dell looked closer. There was a small injection port in the IV line, just above where it entered his arm. A tiny puncture mark, fresh, in the plastic tubing. Someone had injected something into his IV after it had been hung. Dell's heart went cold. She followed the line back to the bag. The liquid inside wasn't quite clear. There was a faint milky swirl to it, barely visible. Potassium chloride. In high enough doses, it caused cardiac arrest. Stopped the heart dead. And if you didn't know to look for it, if you didn't run the right tox screen, it looked exactly like natural causes. A man with 3 bullet wounds and major surgery, his heart giving out. Not suspicious at all. They were going to kill him. Not with guns or knives, with medicine. Quiet, clean, untraceable. Dell didn't hesitate. She ripped the IV line out of Nomad's arm. Blood sprayed across the white sheets. The cardiac monitor started beeping faster, alarmed by his sudden tachycardia. The MPs were at the door instantly. "What did you do?" "He's coding," Dell screamed, spinning to face them. "Get the crash cart. Call a code." The tall MP turned and ran down the hallway, yelling. The second one stayed but backed away from the door, not wanting to be in the room when the crash team arrived. Dell grabbed a fresh IV bag from the supply cabinet, spiking it with practiced speed. She shoved the contaminated bag under her scrub top, the plastic cold against her skin. Then she leaned back down to Nomad. "They just tried to kill you, in your sleep, which means we're out of time." She looked at his intubation tube. "I'm going to remove this. It's going to hurt. Don't make a sound." She grabbed the tape holding the tube in place and ripped it off. Nomad's eyes watered, but he didn't move, didn't make noise. Dell yanked the endotracheal tube out in one smooth motion. Nomad gagged, coughed, his body arching off the bed. Blood-tinged sputum sprayed from his mouth. But he was breathing on his own now, ragged gasps that sounded like freedom. "Can you walk?" Dell whispered. He nodded barely. "Then we're leaving, right now." The sound of the crash team was coming down the hallway, shouting voices and the rattle of the cart's wheels. Dell moved fast. She grabbed a lab coat from the hook on the wall and threw it over Nomad's shoulders. A surgical cap over his head. It wasn't much of a disguise, but it would have to do. She unlocked the handcuffs using the universal key she had borrowed from the security desk earlier, the one every nurse knew how to get their hands on for situations exactly like this. Nomad swung his legs over the side of the bed. He was wearing just a hospital gown, and his legs were shaking badly. Dell wrapped an arm around his waist, taking his weight. "Service elevator," she said. "The one they use for laundry and waste. It's our only shot." They moved toward the door. Dell kicked the brake off the hospital bed and shoved it toward the doorway, creating a barrier. Then she and Nomad went the other direction, toward the nurse's station, toward the small service elevator that no one ever used because it was slow and smelled like bleach. Behind them, the crash team arrived. Dell could hear Dr. Pierce shouting, "Where's the patient? Where's the goddamn patient?" The elevator doors closed just as someone shouted, "He's gone! Lock down the floor!" The elevator descended with agonizing slowness. Nomad was leaning heavily against Dell. His breathing labored. Blood was seeping through the bandages on his abdomen, dark flowers blooming on white gauze. "You're insane," he rasped. His voice sounded like broken glass. "They'll kill you for this." "They were already trying to kill you. At least this way, we have a chance." The elevator dinged. Basement level. Pathology in the morgue. Dell helped Nomad out into the hallway. It was freezing down here, the air conditioning cranked high to preserve the dead. The smell of formaldehyde and industrial cleaner made her eyes water. "Morgue," she said. "We're going out through the morgue." "You've done this before?" "No, but I've thought about it. We all have." She led him to the pathology prep room, grabbed a gurney, and helped him lie down on the cold stainless steel. He groaned, but did it. Dell threw a white sheet over him, covering him completely. "Dead guy coming through," she said. "Don't move. Don't breathe heavy. She pushed the gurney toward the loading bay doors, where funeral homes usually picked up bodies. There was supposed to be Old Man Jerry on duty, the night guard who read paperback westerns and didn't care about anything as long as you didn't bother him. But when Dell pushed through the doors, it wasn't Jerry sitting by the rolling door. It was a new guy, thick-necked and alert, the kind of alert that meant he was looking for something. He stood up when he saw her. "Hold up, where are you taking that?" Dell didn't slow down. She pushed the gurney right up to his shins and stopped. She pulled down her surgical mask, letting him see her face. The exhaustion there, the anger. "This isn't a release," she said. Her voice had an edge that could cut steel. "This is a transfer to the overflow morgue, because our main freezer is broken again, and I have been on shift for 16 hours, and I swear to God, if you make me fill out one more form, I am going to lose my mind. You want to smell a 3-day-old floater? Be my guest. Check him yourself." She grabbed the corner of the sheet like she was going to pull it back. The guard wrinkled his nose and stepped back. The smell of blood and sickness coming off the gurney was real enough. "Jesus, just go. Go." Dell pushed through into the loading bay. Rain hit her face, cold and clean. She scanned the lot. Her Honda Civic was 50 yards away, parked in the far corner of the employee section. "Clear," she whispered. Nomad sat up, the sheet falling away. He looked like a corpse that had decided to walk, gray-skinned and hollow-eyed. But he was breathing and conscious, and that was enough. They made it to the Honda. Dell lowered the passenger seat all the way back, and Nomad collapsed into it. She threw a blanket over him, the emergency one from her trunk, and started the engine. It sputtered, coughed, caught. A black SUV came around the corner of the hospital, searchlights mounted on the roof sweeping across the parking lot. Dell drove, slowly, carefully, like someone who was tired and going home after a long shift, and absolutely did not have a fugitive bleeding out in her passenger seat. The exit barrier was down. A police officer stood there with a flashlight, checking badges and faces. Dell rolled down her window. Rain blew in. The cop shined his light in her face, and she had to fight not to flinch. "Badge," he said. She handed over her hospital ID. Her hand was steady. She was good at steady. 4 years as a combat medic had taught her that the only way to save someone was to be calm when everyone else was losing their minds. "Rough night?" the cop asked, looking at her blood-stained scrubs. "Lost a patient," Dell said. Her voice cracked. It wasn't acting. "Young guy. Didn't have to die." The cop's expression softened. He looked human for a moment. "Go home, miss. Get some rest." The barrier lifted. Dell drove through, out into the rain-soaked streets of Seattle. She didn't exhale until they were on the highway, heading north toward the mountains. Beside her, Nomad was shivering violently. "They're tracking us," he said through chattering teeth. "Your car. Every modern car has GPS. They can find us." "Then we ditch the car." "Where are we going?" Dell gripped the steering wheel. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't think to look." "No place is safe. Not from Keller." "Who's Keller?" Nomad closed his eyes. "The man who killed your brother." The rain kept falling, and Dell drove through it toward the mountains, toward her grandfather's old cabin in the woods, toward answers that had been buried for 6 years. Behind them, the city lights faded into the darkness, and somewhere in that darkness, Colonel Wade Keller was making phone calls, activating kill teams, closing the net. The hunt had begun. The cabin sat in the Cascade foothills like a secret that had been kept for too long. Delaney Kincaid hadn't been here in 3 years, not since her grandfather's funeral, but the place looked exactly the same. Weathered cedar logs, a stone chimney, windows that reflected the forest like dark mirrors. Behind it, Mount Baker rose into low clouds, snow-capped and indifferent. She pulled the stolen pickup truck into the clearing just as dawn was breaking gray and cold over the mountains. Matthias Brennan was barely conscious in the passenger seat, his breathing shallow, his skin the color of old newspaper. Dell killed the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden silence. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion and adrenaline crash and the slowly dawning realization of what she had just done. She had assaulted hospital security, stolen a patient, fled from federal agents, and committed about a dozen felonies before breakfast. Her grandfather would have been proud. She got out and moved around to help Brennan. He tried to stand on his own and immediately collapsed. Dell caught him, taking his weight. For a man who looked like he was carved from spare parts and bad memories, he was surprisingly heavy. "Come on, Lieutenant," she said. "Just a few more steps." They made it inside. The cabin smelled like dust, an old pine, and the ghost of her grandfather's pipe tobacco. Dell lowered Brennan onto the ancient leather couch that Reese Kincaid had owned since the first Gulf War. The cushions exhaled decades of accumulated memories. Brennan's eyes fluttered open. "Where are we?" "Family property, Snoqualmie Pass. My grandfather bought this cabin in the 80s as a hunting retreat. But the real survival shelter, the bunker, that's half a mile north. He built that one during the Cuban Missile Crisis." Dell was already pulling medical supplies from her go bag. Thought the Russians were going to nuke Seattle, wanted somewhere to survive the fallout. She cut away Brennan's hospital gown and examined the surgical wounds. They were angry and red but holding. No signs of infection yet, though that would change if she didn't get real antibiotics into him soon. The stitches were professional work, tight and neat. Good surgeons. They had wanted him alive, until someone had tried to kill him with potassium chloride. Dell cleaned the wounds with betadine, her hands moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 battlefield dressings. Brennan hissed through his teeth but didn't move. "You're good at this," he said. "Army medic, 4 years, 3 tours. Iraq twice, Afghanistan once." She applied fresh gauze, taping it down. "I've patched up worse." "Why'd you quit?" Dell's hands paused for just a moment. "My brother died. After that, I didn't see the point anymore." Brennan watched her face. "Garrett." "Yeah, Garrett." She grabbed an IV kit from her bag, found a vein in his arm, and started a saline drip. "The Navy said training accident, closed casket, wouldn't let us see the body, wouldn't tell us where it happened or how, just handed my parents a flag and some medals and a story that didn't make any sense." "It wasn't an accident." Dell looked up. "I know. Tell me what happened." Brennan closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and far away. "Yemen, February 2020, Operation Nightfall. We were sent to eliminate a high-value target at a tech school outside Al-Hudaydah. A tech school for girls, ages 10 to 16, teaching math and computer science." Brennan's jaw tightened. The target was an American exchange student, 12 years old. Name was Sienna Marlowe. Dell felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why would you target a child? "She developed an encryption algorithm, quantum-resistant, unbreakable, the kind of thing that could change the balance of power if it got into the wrong hands. Intel said she had shared it with a professor in Cairo who had ties to Iranian intelligence." Brennan opened his eyes. "The order came from the top. Eliminate the target, no witnesses, burn it all." Jesus Christ. Captain Wade Keller was our team leader. He was ready to follow the order. Your brother wasn't. Neither was I. Brennan's voice got harder. Garrett stood in front of that little girl's bed and refused to move. Told Keller it was murder. I backed him up. What did Keller do? Shot him, 2 rounds to the chest. The plate carrier saved his life but knocked him down. I threw a flashbang and we ran, grabbed the girl and got out. Brennan's eyes were distant, seeing something 6 years and 10,000 miles away. The rest of the team was confused, didn't know what was happening. We made it to the extraction point, but the helicopter was gone. They'd left us. Dell's hands had stopped working. She was just staring at him. Keller sent the team after us. We fought our way to a ravine. I told Garrett to take the girl and run. I'd cover them. Brennan touched his side, where the fresh bullet wounds were. Last thing I remember clearly is returning fire, then an explosion, then waking up in a fishing village 3 days later with half my blood on the outside and a Yemeni family keeping me alive. And Garrett? I thought he was dead. The official story said he died in a training accident. I was listed as dead too. The whole team was scattered, transferred. Some of them died in what looked like accidents over the next few years. Brennan's voice was hollow. Keller was cleaning up witnesses. I stayed underground in Europe for 4 years. Then the CIA grabbed me in Berlin 6 months ago. Black site in Poland. Interrogation. They wanted to know where the girl was, where the evidence was. What evidence? Brennan reached into the pocket of the lab coat Dell had thrown over him. His hand came out with a small object wrapped in surgical tape. He peeled the tape away to reveal a micro USB drive, no bigger than a thumbnail. Helmet cam footage from Yemen, the kill order with Keller's signature, financial records showing black budget money being funneled to offshore accounts, proof that Operation Nightfall wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something bigger, Project Azrael, a program to eliminate threats that couldn't be handled through official channels. Dell took the drive carefully, like it might explode. How many threats? 12 that we know of. Whistleblowers, journalists, foreign assets who knew too much. All of them made to look like accidents or terrorist attacks. Brennan leaned back, exhausted. I kept this drive hidden for 6 years. It's the only thing keeping me alive, the only leverage I have. Then why come to Seattle? Why surface now? Brennan reached into another pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. His hands were shaking badly as he handed it to Dell. She unfolded it. The paper was worn, like it had been read many times. The handwriting was angular and rushed. The coordinates read 47.6062 degrees north, 3,321 degrees west. Below that, 4 words, treehouse still standing, package secure. And at the bottom, a signature that made Dell's heart stop, G. Kincaid. That's Garrett's handwriting, she whispered. 3 days ago, a guard at the black site slipped that to me, said it came through a dead drop network, untraceable. Brennan watched her face. I broke out that same night during a transfer, killed 2 guards, made it to Berlin within 18 hours, then Paris, then New York, then Portland, all in 72 hours. Keller's people were 1 step behind me the whole way. They caught up to me on I-5. Dell stared at the coordinates. She pulled out her phone and entered them into the map. The screen loaded slowly in the spotty mountain reception. Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, Bremerton, Washington, specifically Dry Dock 4. That's a decommissioned destroyer graveyard, she said. Ships they've stripped for parts and left to rust. Perfect place for a ghost to hide. Dell looked at Brennan. You think he's alive? After 6 years, you think Garrett is alive and hiding at that shipyard with the girl? I think someone wants me to think that. And I think there's only one way to find out. A sound cut through the morning air, distant but getting closer. The low thrum of a heavy diesel engine. Brennan sat up too fast, wincing. They found us. How? We ditched my car. We stole a truck that doesn't have GPS. Satellites, thermal imaging, 2 heat signatures in the middle of nowhere, moving from Seattle toward the mountains. AI flags it automatically. They've been tracking us for the last hour. Brennan tried to stand and nearly fell. We need to move. Now. Dell grabbed the M24 rifle from the corner where it had stood untouched for 3 years. Her grandfather's rifle. Remington M24 sniper weapon system. Military issue from the First Gulf War. Chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. She had learned to shoot on this rifle when she was 10 years old. Learned to hit targets at distances that seemed impossible. Learned that patience and breathing and mathematics could turn lead into precision. She worked the bolt, checking the action. It moved smoothly, well-oiled even after years of storage. Reese Kincaid had been many things, but careless wasn't one of them. "Get down," she told Brennan. "Behind the couch, don't move." She moved to the attic ladder, climbed quickly, and positioned herself at the dormer window that faced the access road. Through the scope, she could see them coming. 4 men in a black SUV, moving slowly, scanning the forest. Professional contractors, Delta Force probably, or former. The kind of men who got paid 6 figures to do the jobs the military couldn't officially acknowledge. 723 yards out, Dell's heart slowed. Her breathing deepened. She let the world narrow to the scope, to the mathematics of wind and distance and bullet drop. First rule her grandfather had taught her: a Kincaid shoots once, confirms twice, never wastes a third. She put the crosshairs on the driver's head, adjusted for wind, for the slight upward angle, for the fact that the target was moving. Her finger rested on the trigger, not pulling, just waiting for the moment between heartbeats when everything aligned. The SUV drove through a gap in the trees. Dell fired. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the windshield star, saw the driver's head snap back. The SUV swerved hard left, crashed into a tree, stopped. The other 3 men bailed out fast, moving with tactical precision. They had rifles up, scanning for the source of the shot. One of them pointed at the cabin. Dell cycled the bolt, the spent casing ejecting with a metallic clink. She found the next target through the scope. 680 yards now. The man was moving, using trees for cover, but he paused for just a moment to key his radio. Dell squeezed the trigger. The man went down. The remaining 2 mercs realized what they were facing. A sniper, long gun, trained shooter. They stopped trying to advance and started trying to survive, sprinting for better cover, laying down suppressing fire even though they couldn't see their target. Dell took her time, found the 3rd man as he was diving behind a boulder, adjusted her aim, fired. The bullet hit him in the leg, spinning him around. Not a kill shot, but enough to take him out of the fight. The 4th merc made the smart decision. He ran, grabbed the wounded man, dragged him back to the SUV, and drove away in reverse, the vehicle weaving through the trees. Dell watched them go through the scope. Let them run. She had made her point. She climbed down from the attic. Brennan was still behind the couch, his face gray. How many? 4. Dropped 1, wounded another. They're retreating. They'll call for backup, more teams, maybe air support. Dell grabbed a tactical radio from her bag, one she'd taken off a dead insurgent in Kandahar and kept as a souvenir. She turned it on, cycled through frequencies until she found one with activity. A voice crackled through, cold, authoritative. QRF-1, report status. QRF-1, contact, sniper, long gun, 1 KIA, 1 wounded. Target has military training. Recommend, the voice cut him off. I don't care about your recommendations. I want Brennan dead and that drive recovered. Send QRF-2 and 3. Converge on the position. Kill everyone. Burn it down. Understood, Colonel. Colonel. Dell felt ice run down her spine. Is that Keller? Brennan nodded. That's him. The voice on the radio continued. And listen carefully. The target is with Garrett Kincaid's sister now. Delaney, former Army medic, sniper trained. She's dangerous. Don't underestimate her. Dell looked at the radio. Keller knew her name, knew her background, had probably known she would come for Brennan the moment he appeared in her ER. The shipyard, Keller's voice said. Protocol is green. I want them both there. I want them to walk right into it. The radio went silent. Brennan was looking at her. It's a trap. The coordinates, the note. Keller wrote it. He wants us at Bremerton. Why? Because he needs this drive. He can't get it while I'm in CIA custody. Too many eyes watching. But if I escape, if I come after him, then he can kill me and take it and call it self-defense. Brennan's voice was bitter. He's been setting this up for months. Dell walked to the window, looking out at the forest. The sun was fully up now, cold winter light filtering through the pines. Somewhere out there, more teams were coming. More men with guns and orders to kill. She made a decision. We need weapons, real ones, and we need transportation. She turned to Brennan. There's a bunker, half a mile north. My grandfather built it during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Thought the world was going to end, and he wanted to be ready. A bunker? Survival shelter. Reinforced concrete, hidden entrance, stocked with enough supplies to last a year. Dell grabbed her medical bag. And an armory that would make most National Guard units jealous. Reese Kincaid didn't do anything halfway. They left the cabin through the back door, moving slowly because Brennan could barely walk. Dell supported his weight, one arm around his waist, the M24 slung across her back. They followed an old deer trail that wound through the trees, invisible unless you knew it was there. The bunker entrance was hidden under what looked like a natural boulder formation. Dell moved aside a false rock, revealing a keypad. She entered the code. 6 digits, her birthday. The lock clicked and a section of the ground swung open on hydraulic hinges. Stairs led down into darkness. Grandpa always said the Russians would come with nukes, but to be ready for anything. Dell flicked on a light switch. Fluorescent tubes hummed to life. He wasn't wrong, just early. The bunker was larger than it looked from outside. One main room with branching storage areas. The walls were concrete, 3 feet thick. The air was cool and dry, filtered through a ventilation system that still worked after 40 years. And along one wall was the armory. Rifles in racks, handguns in foam cutouts, ammunition in military crates stamped with dates from the 1980s and 90s. Dell recognized most of it from her grandfather's stories. The M16A2 he had carried in Desert Storm. The Colt 1911 pistols, 4 of them, all maintained and ready. The M4A1 carbines with ACOG scopes. And there, in the center rack, another M24, twin to the one she carried. Brennan whistled low. Your grandfather was serious. Gulf War veteran, Force Recon Marine, served with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Dell touched the framed photo on the wall. A younger Reese Kincaid in desert camo, weathered and hard-eyed, standing in front of a Bradley fighting vehicle. He taught me and Garrett to shoot before we could drive, said the world was dangerous, and the Kincaids didn't rely on anyone else for protection. Next to the photo was a plaque, engraved brass on dark wood. It read, Kincaid Code, Courage, Precision, Honor. Dell stared at it for a long moment. Brennan sat down heavily on a camp chair, his strength finally giving out. You should leave me here. Take a rifle, head for Canada. You've done enough. Shut up. I'm serious, this isn't your fight. Your brother is probably dead, and I'm just the last guy who saw him alive. The smart thing is to run. Dell turned to face him. Her eyes were hard. When I was in Afghanistan, we had a saying, you go home with everyone, or you don't go home. I didn't bring you this far to leave you in a hole in the ground. I'm dying anyway. These wounds, without proper medical care, then we get you proper medical care. After. Dell grabbed IV antibiotics from the bunker's medical supplies, the good stuff, vancomycin and ceftriaxone. She started a new IV line, pushing the drugs into Brennan's system. You're not dying, Lieutenant. Not today. Brennan closed his eyes. Why are you doing this? Because 6 years ago, the Navy told me my brother died in a training accident, and I knew they were lying. And for 6 years, I've lived with that. The not knowing, the questions. Dell's voice cracked. You're the first person who's told me the truth. The first person who's given me a chance to find out what really happened. Even if it gets you killed, even then. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Dell's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, surprised there was reception this deep. A text message. Unknown number. It read, Delaney, this is Reese. Call me. Encrypted line. It's about Garrett. Dell stared at the screen. Her grandfather had been dead for 3 years, except apparently he wasn't. She grabbed the bunker's secure satellite phone, a military model that scrambled transmissions. She dialed the number from the text. It rang once. A voice answered, rough and familiar and impossible. Dell, it's Grandpa Reese. Before you ask, yes, it's really me. And no, I'm not dead. We need to talk. Dell sat down hard. How? Long story. Short version, I faked my death 3 years ago because Keller had surveillance on the whole family. Couldn't protect you and Garrett if I was alive and visible. Reese Kincaid's voice was exactly how she remembered it. Gravel and iron and absolute certainty. I've been working with Garrett for the past 8 months. Garrett is alive. Yes. You've known this whole time. Yes. Dell felt tears streaming down her face. Anger and relief and 6 years of grief hitting her all at once. Why didn't you tell me? Because Keller was watching. Phone taps, email surveillance, physical surveillance. If I had contacted you, he would have known. Would have used you to get to Garrett. I couldn't risk that. Reese's voice softened. I'm sorry, kiddo, but I'm telling you now, Garrett is alive and he's at Bremerton with the girl. They've been waiting for Brennan. It's a trap, Keller set it up. I know, that's why I'm calling. Papers rustled on the other end. Listen carefully. Garrett and Sienna have been at Dry Dock 4 for 2 weeks. They've fortified the USS Lansing, old destroyer that was decommissioned in 2015. Garrett's set up an overwatch position on the bridge. High ground, clear lines of sight. The girl, Sienna, she's 18 now and brilliant. She's hacked into the shipyard's electrical and security systems. What's the plan? Keller thinks he's setting a trap for Brennan, but Garrett's been planning this for 6 years. He wants Keller to come, wants him to expose himself on U.S. soil with witnesses. That's the only way to bring him down. Reese paused. But it's going to be bad, Dell. Keller will have a battalion, maybe more. You and Brennan will be walking into a kill box. Then we need backup. I'm working on it. I've got a call into Admiral Rebecca Moss. We served together in Desert Storm. She owes me. But even if she authorizes Navy response, it'll take 90 minutes minimum to mobilize. We don't have 90 minutes. I know. Reese's voice got quieter. Dell, you were always the best shot. Better than Garrett, better than me if I'm honest. But this isn't a shooting competition. This is a war. Are you ready for that? Dell looked at Brennan, at the USB drive sitting on the table, at the rifles on the wall. I'm a Kincaid, she said. I was born ready. That's my girl. Pride in his voice, clear as daylight. Here's what you need to know. Approach from the North Access Road, Gate 3. Garrett will have eyes on it. He'll recognize you. But Keller will have drones, thermal imaging, maybe air support. You need to draw fire. Keep Keller focused on you until the Navy arrives. How do we do that? You make yourself too big a target to ignore. Reese chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. Remember what I taught you. A Kincaid doesn't hide. A Kincaid stands tall. They talked for another 10 minutes, Reese giving her details about the shipyard layout, about where Garrett would be positioned, about Keller's likely tactics. When they hung up, Dell felt steadier, clearer. She looked at Brennan. How's your head? Fuzzy, but getting better. Can you shoot? He nodded slowly. Point me at targets and I'll drop them. Dell began loading weapons. M4A1 carbine for herself. The second M24 for Brennan. A Colt 1911 for backup. Magazines, ammunition, tactical vests from Reese's old gear. It all fit surprisingly well. The old man had kept it maintained. She found something else in a footlocker. Night vision goggles, flares, and a box of her grandfather's medals. The silver star on top, gleaming even in the fluorescent light. Underneath was a letter, addressed to her, in Reese's handwriting. She opened it. Dell, if you're reading this, things have gone to hell and I'm either dead for real or we're about to do something incredibly stupid. Probably the second one. You should know I'm proud of you. Prouder than I ever said when I was alive. You and Garrett, you're the best thing I ever did. Take care of your brother. Take care of Brennan. Take care of each other. And remember, a Kincaid shoots once, confirms twice, never needs a third. Love, Grandpa. Dell folded the letter carefully and put it in her vest pocket, right over her heart. Let's gear up, she said. We've got a shipyard to assault and a brother to save. They spent the next 30 minutes preparing. Dell changed Brennan's dressings, gave him another dose of antibiotics, loaded him with as much ibuprofen as he could safely take. It wasn't enough, but it would have to do. They took the Jeep Cherokee from the bunker's hidden garage, a vehicle Reese had kept specifically for emergencies. It was old and beaten, but the engine turned over strong. They loaded the weapons, the ammunition, the medical supplies. Dell took one last look at the bunker, at the photos of her grandfather, young and hard and ready, at the rifles on the wall, at the Kincaid code plaque. Courage, precision, honor. She turned off the lights and sealed the door behind them. The drive to Bremerton would take 2 hours if they pushed it. 2 hours to prepare, 2 hours to accept what was coming. They drove in silence through the mountains, down toward Puget Sound. The radio on the dashboard crackled occasionally with tactical chatter. Keller's teams repositioning, converging on the shipyard, setting up the trap. Brennan spoke quietly from the passenger seat. You know we're probably going to die. Probably. And you're still doing this. Dell kept her eyes on the road. 6 years ago, someone murdered 31 people, including children, and blamed it on terrorists. Then they spent 6 years hunting the witnesses, killing anyone who knew the truth. My brother has been living underground this whole time, protecting a girl he saved, waiting for a chance to make it right. She glanced at Brennan. Yeah, I'm still doing this. Garrett was right about you. What did he say? That his little sister could shoot a quarter at 600 yards and was too stubborn to know when to quit. Brennan smiled slightly. He said you were the toughest person he ever met, and that included Marines. He always was a liar. They drove on. The mountains gave way to foothills, then to the flatlands around Puget Sound. In the distance, Dell could see the shipyard. Massive cranes silhouetted against gray sky. The hulls of warships, some active, some dead and waiting to be scrapped. And somewhere in that industrial graveyard, her brother was waiting. If he was alive, if this wasn't all an elaborate trap, if they weren't driving straight into hell with no way out. Dell reached over and touched the letter in her pocket, felt the edges of the paper, the weight of the words. A Kincaid shoots once, confirms twice, never needs a third. Load your weapon, she told Brennan. We're almost there. He checked the M24, made sure the scope was zeroed, loaded 5 rounds into the magazine. Dell did the same with her M4, loading 30-round magazines and racking around into the chamber. The shipyard grew larger. They could see the perimeter fence now, the guard towers, the main gate. But they weren't going in the main gate. Dell turned onto a service road that wound around the north side of the complex. Gate 3. Reese had said Garrett would be watching Gate 3. The gate was chain link and rust, topped with barbed wire. A sign read, Restricted Area, Authorized Personnel Only. Dell stopped the Jeep 50 yards out. She pulled out her grandfather's binoculars and scanned the shipyard beyond the fence. There, Dry Dock 4, a massive concrete pit with a destroyer sitting in it like a corpse in a coffin. USS Lansing. The hull was rust-red and gray, stripped of everything valuable, left to rot. And on the bridge, 90 feet up, a glint of light. Scope reflection. Someone was watching. Dell keyed the radio to the frequency Reese had given her. Sierra 1, this is Sierra 2. We're at the north gate. Verify signal. Static. Then a voice. Male. Familiar enough to make her heart stop. Sierra 2. Echo. Victor. Tango. Welcome home, little sister. Garrett. Dell closed her eyes. let out a breath she had been holding for 6 years. "Good to hear your voice," she said. "Yours too. You brought Nomad?" "Barely. He's shot up and half dead, but he's here." "Of course he is. He's too mean to die." A pause. "Del, you need to know. Keller's here. He's got 12 contractors, maybe more. Drones overhead. This is going to get loud." "I know. You don't have to do this. You could turn around right now." Del looked at Brennan, at the shipyard, at the path that had led her here through 6 years of lies and grief and unanswered questions. "I'm not turning around," she said. "I'm coming in. Then come fast and come hard. And Del, it's good to see you." She looked through the binoculars again, saw a figure on the bridge, tall and lean, raising a hand in greeting. Her brother, alive. Del put the Jeep in gear. "Brennan, hold on to something." "What are you doing?" Making an entrance, she floored the accelerator. The Jeep shot forward, engine roaring. The chain-link gate rushed toward them. Del didn't brake. The Jeep hit the gate at 40 miles an hour. The chain link tore away from its moorings with a screech of tortured metal. The gate collapsed under them, and they drove over it, into the shipyard, into the trap, into the war. Behind them, every alarm in the facility started screaming. And somewhere in the darkness of the dry dock, Colonel Wade Keller watched the monitor showing the collapsed gate. He smiled and keyed his radio. "All units, positions, let them commit. I want them in the center of the dock before we engage." He paused, savoring the moment. "Floodlights on my mark." His second-in-command responded, "Ready, sir." Keller watched Del's Jeep roll into the kill zone. "Light them up." The floodlights hit them like the sun falling from heaven. Delaney Kincaid threw her arm across her eyes, momentarily blinded as a dozen halogen spotlights snapped on simultaneously, turning the shipyard into a stage of white fire. The Jeep skidded to a halt in the gravel near Dry Dock 4, engine ticking in the sudden silence after the alarm stopped. Then the silence broke. "Delaney Kincaid." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified through the shipyard's PA system. Smooth, confident, the voice of a man who had never lost. "I was wondering when you'd arrive. Right on schedule." Del grabbed the M4 and rolled out of the Jeep, taking cover behind the engine block. Brennan followed, moving slower, but managing to get the M24 into position. Through her scope, Del could see them emerging from the shadows between shipping containers and crane supports. Men in black tactical gear, rifles with infrared lasers, professional contractors with professional weapons, and the kind of training that costs 6 figures and a moral compass. She counted 8, no, 10, no, 12. Too many. "You're surrounded," the voice continued, "outgunned, outmanned, and you've driven yourself into a kill zone with no exits. That takes either incredible courage or incredible stupidity." A pause. "I'm betting stupidity." A man stepped into the light, mid-40s, fit, with a kind of posture that screamed military academy and 20 years of command. He wore a dress uniform, stars gleaming on his shoulders. 2 stars, Brigadier General, Colonel no more. Keller had been promoted. He walked toward the Jeep slowly, hands clasped behind his back, completely relaxed, like he was inspecting troops, not standing in the open with 2 armed hostiles 50 yards away. "You must be wondering how I knew you'd come," Keller said. His voice was pleasant, conversational. "How I knew exactly when and where. Let me tell you a secret, Miss Kincaid. I didn't send that note to Brennan. Your brother did." Del felt ice water flood her veins. "Oh yes, Garrett is here. Been here for 2 weeks, setting up his little nest on that destroyer." Keller smiled. "But here's what he doesn't know. One of my men has been inside his perimeter for 3 days. A sleeper, waiting. And the moment you stepped through that gate, the moment you committed yourself, my man activated. A single gunshot cracked across the shipyard. High up on the USS Lansing's bridge, something moved. A figure stumbled. Dell saw it through her scope, saw her brother drop to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Garrett! She was moving before she could think, sprinting toward the dry dock. Dell, no! Brennan's voice, but she was already gone. Rifle up, running through the open ground. Keller's contractors opened fire. The world exploded into violence. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness. Bullets cracked past Dell's head, sparking off concrete, whining into the distance. She dove behind a shipping container as a burst of automatic fire chewed up the ground where she'd been standing. Her radio crackled. Garrett's voice strained with pain. Dell, stop. It's a trap. The whole thing. He's been playing us. Are you hit? Shoulder, through and through. I'm okay. His breathing was ragged. But Sienna's pinned down. The shooter is between us. I can't get to her. Dell pressed her back against the container. Bullets hammered against the metal on the other side. Through a gap, she could see Brennan still behind the Jeep. The M24 barking methodically. Each shot a statement. Each statement final. One of Keller's contractors went down. Then another. Brennan might be shot up and barely standing, but he could still shoot. Old soldiers never forgot. Garrett, where's the shooter? Starboard side, deck 3, behind the forward gun mount. Static. Dell, you can't reach me. There's no way across the dock without exposing yourself. Watch me. She moved. Fast and low, using containers for cover, moving between pools of light and shadow. Behind her, the firefight intensified. Brennan and Keller's main force trading shots. Ahead, the USS Lansing loomed like a rusted cathedral, all sharp angles and shadows. Dell reached the edge of the dry dock. The concrete pit dropped 40 feet straight down. At the bottom, the destroyer sat like a beached whale, her hull streaked with rust and rain. No easy way down, no stairs, just maintenance ladders that looked like they hadn't been used in a decade. Dell slung her rifle and started climbing. The ladder was slick with algae and old rain. Her hands found purchase on rungs that shifted under her weight. Halfway down, a burst of gunfire from above made her flatten against the concrete. Chips of stone rained past her face. Keller's voice echoed. Persistent, I'll give you that. Your grandfather trained you well. A pause. Reese Kincaid, Force Recon Marine. Gulf War, quite the soldier. Pity about his heart attack 3 years ago. Dell kept climbing, didn't respond, saved her breath. Oh, you didn't know? The death was faked, of course. Reese has been running interference for Garrett this whole time. Quite clever, really. Keller sounded amused. But not clever enough. We've had surveillance on that Idaho ranch for months. The moment he made contact with Admiral Moss, we knew. She's not coming, Miss Kincaid. There's no cavalry. Dell reached the bottom of the dry dock. The destroyer's hull towered above her, plates of rusted steel like the scales of a sleeping dragon. She found a cargo net hanging from the deck and started climbing again. Hand over hand, feet finding purchase, muscles burning. On the deck, she moved in a crouch. The ship was a maze of stripped equipment, open hatches, twisted metal. Dangerous even in daylight, deadly in the dark. She keyed her radio. Garrett, Sienna, where are you? Bridge, upper level. Garrett's voice was weaker. He was bleeding out. Sienna's in the radar room below me. Doors jammed. The shooter's between us and I can't get a clean angle. I'm coming to you. Dell, he's good, professional. Maybe Spetsnaz, maybe SAS. Not some contractor. He's been waiting for days. He knows this ship better than we do. Then I'll have to be better. She moved through the superstructure, rifle leading. Every shadow could hide death. Every sound could be the last thing she heard. The ship creaked and groaned around her, metal settling, wind through gaps in the hull. A sound above. Boots on steel. Dell froze, looked up. The shooter was there, 3 decks above, moving fast, confident. She caught a glimpse through a gap in the deck plating. Male, average height, moving like a dancer. He hadn't seen her yet. She raised her rifle, put the red dot on where he would be in 3 seconds if he maintained his pace. Breathed out, squeezed. The shot was loud in the confined space. The bullet punched through thin deck plating. Above, she heard a grunt, then silence. Then a grenade clattered down through the hole her bullet had made. Dell ran. The explosion was deafening, a pressure wave that picked her up and threw her into a bulkhead. Her ears rang. Blood ran from her nose, but she was alive and moving, and that was enough. She scrambled up a ladder, rifle lost somewhere in the blast, drawing her 1911 pistol. 7 rounds of .45 ACP. The gun her grandfather had carried in Desert Storm when everything went wrong, and it was down to just you and the enemy, and whoever shot straightest lived. Deck 3. The forward gun mount was a massive turret, stripped of its barrel, just a hollow shell. She moved around it carefully. A voice spoke from the shadows, accented, British. "You're good. Better than your file suggested." Dell didn't answer, didn't give away her position. "But you're bleeding. I can hear your breath." "You're hurt." The voice moved, circling. "Why are you doing this? For a brother who let you think he was dead for 6 years? For a cause that's already lost?" Dell saw him. A flicker of movement reflected in a piece of broken glass. She fired twice. The 1911 bucked in her hand. The bullet sparked off metal. The shooter returned fire. 3 shots, suppressed, professional. 1 round grazed Dell's vest, the impact like a hammer blow. She went down, rolled, came up firing. Click. Slide locked back. Empty. The shooter stepped out of cover. He was smiling. Professional courtesy. One soldier to another. His weapon was raised, center mass on Dell's chest. "Brave," he said, "but not enough." A rifle shot cracked across the deck. The shooter's head snapped back. He fell without a sound, dead before he hit the steel. Dell looked up. On the bridge level, Garrett Kincaid lowered his rifle. His left shoulder was dark with blood, but his hands were steady. "Nobody shoots my sister," he said. Dell found her M4 where it had fallen, checked it over, and climbed to the bridge. Garrett was sitting with his back against the bulkhead, using his belt as a tourniquet on his shoulder. He looked older than she remembered, harder, scars on his face that hadn't been there 6 years ago. But his eyes were the same, sharp and blue and absolutely certain. "Hey, DB," he said, using the old nickname. Dell dropped to her knees beside him. "You look like hell. You should see the other guy." He managed a smile. "Actually, you did. Nice shooting down there. Learn from the best." "Grandpa?" "You idiot." They sat like that for a moment of peace in the middle of war. Then the sound of boots on metal reminded them where they were. "Sienna," Garrett said. "Radar room. 1 deck down. Doors jammed." Dell found the hatch and kicked it open. Inside, a young woman looked up. 18 now, but Dell could still see traces of the 12-year-old child in the photo Brennan had described. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a laptop open in front of her that showed camera feeds from across the shipyard. "You must be the sister," Sienna said. "He talks about you constantly. It's annoying. And you must be the girl he's been protecting for 6 years." "Girl," Sienna stood. "I'm 18, and I've been protecting myself just fine." Dell liked her immediately. "Can you walk?" "I can run if I have to." "Good, because we need to get off this ship. Now." They helped Garrett to his feet. He could walk, but barely. The 3 of them made their way back through the superstructure, down to the main deck. Below in the shipyard, the firefight was still raging. Brennan was holding his position, but barely. Dell could see at least 2 bodies near the jeep, contractors Brennan had dropped. But more were moving in, flanking, closing the noose. And walking through the middle of it all, completely calm, was General Wade Keller. He saw them on the deck, raised a hand in greeting. "There you are, all together. How convenient." His contractors stopped firing. The sudden silence was louder than the gunshots. Keller walked closer to the edge of the dry dock. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that USB drive. All of you are going to surrender. And then we're going to have a conversation about what really happened in Yemen. We're not giving you anything, Dell shouted back. No? Keller pulled a tablet from his vest, tapped it. On the screen, a video feed appeared. An older man, silver-haired, tough as nails, Reese Kincaid. He was zip-tied to a chair in what looked like a barn. Two armed men stood behind him. Grandpa, Dell whispered. That Idaho ranch wasn't as secure as he thought, Keller said. We picked him up 6 hours ago. Very quiet, very professional. He looked at the screen. Wave hello, Colonel. Reese didn't wave, didn't speak, just stared at the camera with absolute defiance. So here's the new deal, Keller said. The drive, all of you. In exchange, the old man lives. You have 60 seconds to decide. Garrett gripped Dell's arm. Don't do it. He's lying. He'll kill us all anyway. I know. Then what do we do? Dell looked at Sienna. The electrical systems, the lights. Can you kill them? Sienna's eyes lit up. I've been waiting for you to ask. She opened her laptop. Give me 10 seconds. We don't have 10 seconds. Then talk fast. Dell keyed her radio to the frequency Reese had given her, the encrypted one. Admiral Moss, if you're listening, now would be a good time. Static. Keller laughed. She's not coming, I told you. The cavalry isn't real. 5 seconds, Sienna said, fingers flying across the keyboard. Dell raised her rifle. Put the red dot on Keller's chest. 600 yards. Wind from the west at maybe 10 miles per hour. Downward angle of 30 degrees. She adjusted her aim. Up and left. Time's up, Keller said. He nodded to someone off screen. On the tablet, one of the guards raised a pistol to Reese's head. Now, Dell said. Sienna hit enter. Every light in the shipyard died. Absolute darkness. The kind of dark that makes you forget which way is up. Contractors shouting, confused, Keller cursing. Dell fired. She couldn't see where the bullet went, couldn't confirm the hit. She cycled the bolt by feel, chambered another round, fired again. 3 more shots into the darkness where Keller had been standing. From across the shipyard, Brennan's M24 barked. 5 shots, methodical and professional, each one aimed at muzzle flashes from Keller's contractors. Chaos, screaming, the sound of men dying in the dark. Then lights, but not the floodlights, helicopter searchlights. 3 of them, Navy Seahawks dropping from the sky like angels of war. And behind them, racing through the shipyard gates, a convoy of Humvees with Marines hanging off the sides. Admiral Rebecca Moss had come, after all. The Marines hit the ground running, professional, overwhelming. They swept through Keller's contractors like a storm through wheat. In less than 2 minutes, it was over. Contractors on the ground, hands zip-tied, medics running to treat the wounded. And in the center of it all, General Wade Keller, on his knees, blood running from a shoulder wound. Dell had missed his heart by 2 inches. She found that acceptable. Admiral Moss herself walked up to the destroyer. She was 60, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had ordered men into combat and never forgotten their names. Delaney Kincaid, she called up. Yes, ma'am. Your grandfather sends his regards. We pulled him out of that barn 20 minutes ago. He's fine, mad as hell, but fine. Moss allowed herself a small smile. Killed one of his guards with a chair leg. At 68, Marines don't retire, they just reload. She looked at Keller. And this piece of work is under arrest for murder, treason, conspiracy, and about 40 other charges. Keller was still smiling, even bleeding, even finished. You can't prove anything, no evidence, no witnesses, just the word of traitors and… Sienna held up the USB drive. Wrong, we have everything. Helmet cam footage, kill orders, financial records, and I've already uploaded copies to 6 different secure servers, including the Pentagon Inspector General and the Senate Intelligence Committee. She smiled sweetly. "You're done." The smile finally left Keller's face. They brought Garrett down on a stretcher. Dell walked beside him, holding his hand. Medics were already working on his shoulder, starting fluids, calling for medevac. Brennan was being loaded into another ambulance. He looked half dead, but when he saw Dell, he managed a thumbs up. "Not bad for a nurse," he said. "Not bad for a half-dead SEAL," she replied. They took Keller away in handcuffs. As they loaded him into a military truck, he looked back at Dell. No smile now, just calculation. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Dell replied. "It is." The ranch sat in the mountains of northern Idaho like a promise that had finally been kept. Delaney Kincaid stood on the porch, watching her grandfather teach Sienna Marlowe to shoot. The old M24 looked natural in the girl's hands now. 3 months of practice had turned nervous energy into confidence. "Breathe," Reese was saying. "Let half out. Hold. Squeeze." The rifle cracked. Downrange at 400 yards, the target showed a new hole. Center mass. "Good," Reese said. "Again." Sienna fired 3 more rounds, all center mass. She lowered the rifle and walked back to the porch, handing it to Reese with practiced care. She stopped in front of Dell. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The nurse who'd stormed a shipyard, the girl who'd been worth dying for. "Thank you," Sienna said quietly, "for coming, for fighting. Most people wouldn't have." Dell pulled her into a hug. Sienna stiffened at first, not used to affection, then relaxed. "You're family now," Dell said, "and Kincaids protect family." When they pulled apart, Sienna's eyes were wet. "Your brother said the same thing. 6 years ago," she smiled. "I'm starting to believe it." "You should." Garrett sat on the porch railing, arm out of the sling now, mostly healed. Brennan was there too, the cane replaced with just a slight limp. He'd taken the job at FBI hostage rescue, started teaching tactical medicine to the next generation. 3 days after the shipyard, the news had broken. Admiral Moss had held a press conference, shown the evidence. The Pentagon had scrambled. Congress had launched investigations. 4 officials resigned, 2 were arrested, and General Wade Keller was awaiting court-martial in a military prison, facing charges that would put him away for life. The families in Yemen had been quietly compensated. The school was being rebuilt. The truth was coming out. It wasn't justice, not complete, but it was something. "You thinking about going back?" Garrett asked Dell. "To nursing?" Dell watched Sienna shoot. The girl was a natural, quick learner, steady hands. She'd already been accepted to MIT under a new name. Computer science, full ride. She'd be starting in the fall. "Maybe," Dell said, "or maybe something else." FBI's always looking for good people, medics with tactical training, people who can shoot and think under pressure. "Is this you recruiting me?" "Maybe," Garrett smiled. "You saved my life, Brennan's life, Sienna's life, and you brought down a conspiracy that went all the way to the Pentagon. I think you might have found your calling." Dell thought about it, about the hospital, about the cabin, about the shipyard, about all the moments in the last 3 months when she'd had to choose between safety and truth. She'd chosen truth every time. "Let me think about it," she said. Reese came back to the porch, leaving Sienna to practice. He handed Dell a beer. They stood together, 3 generations of Kincaids, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Proud of you, kiddo," Reese said quietly. "Your grandmother would have been too." "I just did what you taught me." "No, you did more than that. You made it mean something." He looked at Garrett, at Brennan, at Sienna still shooting downrange. "All of you did." They stood in comfortable silence, the kind of silence earned by people who've been through fire together and come out the other side. Dell's phone buzzed. A text message, unknown number. It read, "Operation Nightingale. Hostage situation, U.S. Embassy, Bogota. Require combat medic with tactical training. Wheels up 600 tomorrow. Interested? Below it, another message. This is Admiral Moss. Your grandfather gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Dell looked at the message. At the mountains. At her family. Garrett noticed. Something up? Job offer. Taking it. Dell thought about her grandfather teaching her to shoot when she was 10. About her brother standing in front of a child's bed in Yemen and refusing an order. About Brennan surviving 6 years underground to protect the truth. About Sienna learning to defend herself so she'd never be a victim again. She thought about the Kincaid Code. Courage, precision, honor. Yeah, she said. I think I am. Garrett grinned. When do you leave? Tomorrow morning, 0600. Then we better make this dinner count. They went inside, the 5 of them around Reese's old table. Food and stories and laughter. The kind of evening that happens when people who should have died somehow didn't. When justice somehow won. When family, broken and scattered, somehow found its way back together. Later, after the others had gone to bed, Dell sat on the porch alone. The stars were out, brilliant in the mountain dark. She pulled the letter from her pocket, the one Reese had left in the bunker. A Kincaid shoots once, confirms twice, never needs a third. She read it one more time, then she folded it carefully and put it away. Tomorrow she'd go to Bogota. Tomorrow she'd start something new. But tonight, she was here. Home. Safe. A figure moved in the darkness. Brennan, limping out onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Too much on my mind. He handed her a mug. They sat together, not talking, just being present, 2 soldiers who'd survived the same war. You know, Brennan said eventually, your brother spent 6 years telling me stories about you. About the little girl who could outshoot grown men, who never quit, who always stood up for what was right even when it cost her. He looked at her. He wasn't exaggerating. He was my brother. He was supposed to brag. It wasn't bragging, it was respect. Brennan sipped his coffee. You saved my life twice. Once in that hospital, once at the shipyard. I don't know how to repay that. You don't have to. We're even. We're not, but maybe we can work toward it. He stood, steadying himself. For what it's worth, your brother spent 6 years telling me you were the toughest person he knew. Tougher than any Marine, any SEAL. He met her eyes. He wasn't wrong. It's been an honor, Sergeant Kincaid. Dell stood and extended her hand. Brennan took it. Firm, solid. A promise between soldiers. The honor's mine, Lieutenant. If Admiral Moss calls again and you're on the team, I'm in. Count on it. They sat back down until the stars began to fade and the sky lightened in the east. Dawn coming. A new day. A new beginning. Inside, Reese was making breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted out. Garrett and Sienna were arguing about something, their voices light and easy. Sounds of family. Sounds of home. Sounds of people who'd fought their way through darkness and somehow found light on the other side. Dell stood up, stretched, felt the ache of old wounds and new ones, felt the weight of what she'd done and what she'd learned. She was 28 years old, a nurse, a medic, a soldier, a sister, a Kincaid, and she was ready for whatever came next. The sun broke over the mountains, turning the sky gold and red. A new day burning away the shadows of the old. Somewhere in a prison cell, Wade Keller sat alone with his choices. Somewhere in Yemen, families were being quietly compensated for losses that should never have happened. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., senators were asking hard questions and demanding harder answers. And here, in the mountains of Idaho, a family was whole again. Not perfect, not undamaged, but whole. Dell walked inside. Garrett looked up and smiled. Reese poured her coffee. Sienna showed her a photo on her phone, something funny, something that made them all laugh. And for that moment, for that perfect moment, the war was over. The protocol was complete. The ghosts had come home.